So we've just been talking about how Australia itself has formed. Now we're going to talk about the first peoples of this land. So we're out here in Ikara, Flinders Ranges in South Australia. And this is the traditional land of the Adianthana people. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Behind me here you can see the paintings from Arkaroo Rock. So the people in this area lived off this land. We've done a lot of this in Unit 2. Unit 3, we're getting into further detail. So the Adianthana people would have lived off this land using all the resources. So there's a natural spring here, so they would have focused here on this land eating the yellow-footed rock wallaby, kangaroos, and multiple other animals and plants and flora and fauna. They have been on this land. There's now proof that the Indigenous peoples have been here for 60,000 years. I'm not sure how old these rocks paintings are, but they'd be very, very old. This is in South Australia. We're going to be concentrating more on the peoples and tribes of Victoria, and for Unit 3 you're going to have to specifically know at least one group of peoples or tribe. I'll come back to you with a bit more information about specific Victorian tribes. Hey, so I'm back from South Australia, in Melbourne along the Yarra River. So this area, hopefully you know the traditional custodians, the traditional owners of this land were the Wurundjeri people, and the area of Melbourne and just outside of Melbourne. This area, the Birrarung or Yarra River, was really integral to their society, or to their clans. It was a place where they could come together to celebrate. They had held many ceremonies here, and it was a place for to sustain them. It's important when researching the different tribes, so the different places that we can look at, groups like Wurundjeri, Birrarung down the coast with Phillip Island, the Woiwurrung over in Grampians area, Taungurung up near Mansfield in the high country. There's many tribes that you can look at and that you have looked at already, and it's really important to know one of these specifically and the specific area in which they're from and the ways in which they interacted with the environment. So all the Indigenous communities and Aboriginal tribes of Australia were very, very diverse. It's easy to generalise and stereotype the different communities, but they all had their own languages, they all had their own customs. But there is a few things that were common amongst them all. So these commonalities, whenever we're talking about the ways that people interact, we want to use we want to pinpoint 3 ideas. When you're writing, you want these 3 ideas, and I need to see them in your answers. So we're looking at perspectives, practices, and impacts, okay? And these all interrelate. So when we're considering Indigenous tribes, when we're looking at perceptions, so you already know that they have quite a spiritual connection with the land, but it goes deeper than that. So because of their belief that their ancestors go back to the land and are from the land, because of their dreaming or the dream time, their stories, their myths, their creation stories, how their world came to be, because of those and because of the fact that ancestors then go back to the earth, they have an incredible connection with the land because it is of them. It is what they will return to. It is a part of their family. So being displaced has a huge negative effect on them. Another commonality between different tribes is the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So they're either nomadic or semi-nomadic often, and this would then also create an even further connection with the land because they require, so like us, like everybody, they require it for their survival, but being within it every day, there's no barrier between them and the environment. that they're living in. So these two also combine to give us the idea of land not only needing to be protected, but as protector as well. So something that will care for us. So we go to number two. I can count. Number two, practices. So how did these perceptions affect the practices of people, say, in the Wurundjeri tribe? So this hunting and gathering was a practice that they used to live off the land. But they had very sophisticated management strategies in this. So they didn't just wipe out areas. They would have breeding, they would ban hunting from breeding areas to ensure that the population would keep regenerating and replenishing, so they would continuously have food. So they were very sophisticated in this idea and this planning. The idea of nomadism or semi-nomadism. So this is also common between different tribes. So nomadism, not having a set place, whereas semi-nomadism is what a lot of the tribes in Victoria would do, is move around depending on season or animal availability. So tribes like those out in the Grampians, sorry, I did remember them but I can't pronounce it. So those out in the Grampians, they had 6 seasons instead of 4. So they had for example, the season of the butterfly, the season of the cockatoo. So these were the different seasons based on the animals that were coming about. So early summer was the season of the butterfly. So they were able to separate it more and know which area they were going to find the most food or would be the coolest, like the Tungarung, who would be in the mountains when it was hot. A really well-known one that you have looked at a lot is Firestick Farming. Again, a really sophisticated practice, and potentially part of the reason why the plants are so adjusted to fire. This would have been a development before Aboriginal arrival. Just a quick note here, that is a Western view, that Aboriginals have been here for 70,000 years. In Indigenous perspective, they've been here forever. Okay, their ancestors have always been part of this land. So you've got to be very careful with that, that we can distinguish those two views. So back to Firestick Farming. It was the practice of lighting an area before leaving it, or as they left it, in order to regenerate the vegetation, but also to clear it, so it made for easier travel. And they could also flush out food, so use it for hunting kangaroos and things like that. The fourth main practice that we look at is sacred sites. So like I said, places along the Yarra, Birrarung Ma was an old ceremonial space where they could all come together. This also connects with the breeding grounds with the hunting and gathering. So there's now scientific evidence to suggest that it's getting really sunny, to suggest that the breeding grounds link with the ceremonial sites. So there's a lot of complexity to these views. And a little extra one, which is still being debated, but there is lots of proof for, is that Indigenous were also agriculturalists. So there's proof to show that they used irrigation and harvesting and storage of food and things like that, as well as their semi-nomadic hunter-gathering lifestyle. So what impacts do these perceptions and practices have? So impacts, obviously fire very quickly impacts the environment, but it also created this clear space. So it's often noted that when the Europeans first arrived, they felt or saw that the Australian environment looked much like a park. And you compare that with now, our heavy undergrowth and our really intense bushfires because of this heavy undergrowth. So by burning off continuously, they were able to reduce the potentially devastating effects of fire. We can't do these practices anymore because of the way that we have developed the environment and urbanized different areas, but it is still a strategy that a lot of land managers look at, and they've gotten a lot of these strategies from Indigenous people because they were the traditional land managers. Some other impacts, dingoes. So dingoes were introduced from Southeast Asia through trading with the northern clans and groups up there. And then there's the decline in megafauna. So I need to take a breath. So there's lots of controversy about what happened to the megafauna. So the first theory that was brought about was the Blitzkrieg Theory, which is what Germany did during the war, where they would blanket bomb everything. So the idea is that first Australians devastated the population and the large animals became extinct. But this doesn't fit with the dates. So date-wise, the first peoples and megafauna coexisted for about 20,000 years. So the other theory is potentially that it was climate change and that the large animals just couldn't be supported in this heating environment anymore. So check below for the activities. We'll have a bit more of a discussion, and just make sure that you know specifically one tribe. Cool. Thanks, guys.